Okay, guys, so the second part of our color discussion will revolve around color theory. How we combine colors, how we put colors together, how we mix colors, all that kind of stuff. You are looking at a basic color wheel. This is called a Ross color wheel, and it's named after a teacher who put this all together and organized it. He came up with it because he thought this would be a great way for his students to be able to look at color and figure out how they're connected together. And so as you look at this, there are 12 colors that are here that are listed in your most common color wheel. By the way, there are other color wheels. It kind of depends on what you're up to. If you've ever worked in web design, you have a whole different kind of color. Digital color is a whole different world. So we're really talking about pigments when we're looking at this sort of color wheel. We're talking about paint and things like that. So anyway, moving on. We start with 3 given colors, and those are the primary colors, and those are red and blue and yellow, and they form a triangle, an equidistant triangle on the color wheel. And you have to get these. Like, you have to go out to the store and buy them. You have to go out in the hills and dig up the minerals and grind them down and make them. But you cannot get these 3 colors by mixing anything else. They are colors unto themselves. Everything else is derived from the 3 primary colors. And so primary, think first, right? So we have primary colors. Now, if you were to mix 2 primary colors in a 50-50 ratio, right? If we took red and we take yellow and we mix it 50-50, we get an orange. Second, right? It's a secondary color. If we mix red and blue, we're going to end up with purple. I believe our book calls it violet. I'm okay either way, but you'll probably more than not see it as violet. If you mix blue and yellow, you'll get green. Okay. Those are the secondary colors. So you have 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue, 3 secondary colors, green, orange, and purple or violet. And then if you take and you were to mix a primary and a secondary, you get a tertiary. A tertiary color, I also want to point out, guys, your teacher might have called these intermediate colors when you were in school. It just depends. Might have called it tertiary, but if they called it intermediate, it's the same thing. Just every college I know calls them tertiary. But you've got a primary and you've got a secondary. You mix that 50-50, you get what we call a tertiary color. And so we have 6 of those, right? 6 different mixes. So you've got a red purple, blue green, yellow orange, red orange, right? And those are basically 50-50 mixes. So you end up with these 12 colors. Now, does that mean there are only 12 colors? No. What you really need to think is this is a complete sphere, right? And you could pick the color that's closer to here, or color to here, or color to here, color here, color here, color here. They're all over. And if you mix towards the center, right, you mix across. If I were to mix some purple with some yellow, that's where we get our browns. Excuse me. So our browns come into play when we start mixing across the color wheel. And then we end up in here until ultimately you should end up technically with black, right? If you mix yellow, red, and blue perfectly, theoretically you should get black. It doesn't quite work that way, but it's very close, I will tell you that. You can get super darn dark by mixing like a blue with its complement, which is orange. So just things to think about as we're going along. But I want you to know primaries, secondaries, and tertiary colors. Neutrals are blacks, whites, and the mix of black and whites. So black, whites, and grays are thought of as neutrals. Simultaneous contrast is what happens. It's a concept. So when you place 2 colors next to each other, what happens? Simultaneous, right? When it's happening at the same time, you put 2 colors. What do they do to each other? And you can see as you look at this, if I take 2 colors that are far apart from each other on the color wheel and place them next to each other, they both intensify each other. They pop out, right? Whereas if I put something on a gray, it tends to flatten down and you sort of lose it. So when we're painting, we're always talking about try to stay away from grays, try to stay away from just adding black, try to add the complement if you want to darken it up, because we saw over on this color wheel that I can get pretty dark by just adding across the color wheel. And I don't have to resort to using a neutral in order to darken up a color. In fact, you really don't want to do that when you paint. So simultaneous contrast is the idea of what happens to colors when they're placed next to each other. In this particular instance, you can see colors closer to each other, right? I removed the gray and I just picked colors that are closer to each other on the color wheel, create a softer feel. Further apart, it's a much more intense feel. Not a right or wrong in this one, just a different thing. This artist, he goes by his art name is 1010. And this is exactly his thing, simultaneous contrast. What happens when he places colors side by side, right? And that's what he does with these big paintings that he does. And this is a painting. It's a flat painting. It looks like it's deep, but he just places colors side by side and shades them in such a way that it feels like they go back in depth. It's all about simultaneous contrast. That's his whole thing. I also want to point out that if we divide the color wheel in half, we end up with a warm side and a cool side. So your yellows, your oranges, your red oranges, your yellow greens are considered more warm colors, whereas your blues, your violets, blue violets, and so forth are considered cool colors. Well, I say that warm colors advance, cool colors recede. It feels like warm colors come towards you and blue colors fall back. Or cool colors, I said cool colors fall back. So like in this one, the orange feels like it's coming towards you more than the blue does. And people like, Vincent van Gogh knew that. When he painted this picture, you can see it feels like the yellow is popping out and the blues are falling back. Excuse me, guys. I also want to bring up intensity, high intensity and low intensity. This refers to the purity of a color. Think of if you just took red straight out of the tube and poured it and just, put it out on the table, it would be pure red, right? But if you mix it down, like over here, and I added some maybe blue to it to get more of a maroon, that means it's been mixed heavily. We call that low intensity. The more it's been mixed down, getting away from pure red, the lower the intensity. The less it's been mixed, the higher the intensity, okay? So if you look at a painting, you can look at this and go, oh, that is really high intensity. Very little mixing happening here. I'm just seeing a lot of straight color, right? But if you look at this, you go, oh my gosh, they mixed and mixed and mixed and mixed colors to get this down to this. So this would be a low intensity painting. You can almost just say if it's realistic, it's probably low intensity. We don't, the lack of purity in a color, it's probably more realistic. High intensity, right? A lot of straight blues, straight oranges, very little mixing going on here. Red, orange, But, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had one more. Okay, so high intensity, low intensity refers to the purity of a color. Now, we also have to take into consideration that people optically blend colors. So when they look at something, they see color, but they also see what's right next to it. And sometimes our eyes have a tendency to blur those over a little bit when we walk away from them. We call this optical blending. And people like Seurat knew this when he painted, and he painted all those little dots. And so if you're up close to it, it looks like there's all these little dots, but when you back up and get away, they all kind of blend together. Our eyes can't separate all those little dots anymore. And that is an optical blending phenomenon. So we have to think about that too as artists, that people can't see something from far away. We're going to talk about color harmonies and color schemes, but this is what designers do all the time. They come up with colors that they're going to pair together, bring together. We always talk about, a pop of color or an accent color or, the base color, things like that. That's what you're looking at here. Obviously, the base color is the charcoal. You've got a secondary color in the greens, and then we're looking at pops of these three. I'll just show you, these are some of the boards that artists use, and we call these inspiration boards. They get their inspiration from pictures. Like they take this picture, they pull the colors out, that sets up a color board that you could use for decoration, for room, for all sorts of things. You could get online and write inspiration boards and come up with a gazillion of these. This one, there's a website that does this that I think is super cool, and they take and they analyze the color palettes that are used in movies. And so you can see these Tim Burton movies that they've analyzed. Tim Burton color palettes are phenomenal in his movies. And you can see what they picked and chose for the primary colors that they were using throughout different scenes in the movies. Now, I want to talk about basic color harmonies or color schemes. Our book refers to them as color harmonies. Sometimes people call them color schemes. But color harmonies deal with the relationship of certain colors and those combination of colors. Complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So an example of a complementary color scheme would be orange and blues. Another one would be red and greens. Another one would be yellow, purple or violet and yellow, right? Now, could it be a blue green and a red orange? Yeah, sure. It could be several different things, right? But oftentimes we think about like orange and blues and so forth. So let me show you a couple examples. This would be a complementary color scheme. It is largely red and green. Right? Now there might be a little orange on this side, but it is dominated, 85% of the work is dominated by red and green. So if you look at your color wheel, you go, yeah, they're across each other on the color wheel. Blue, it could happen in interior design too, right? Blue and orange, look at the color wheel. Yeah, that's complementary colors. It happens in paintings. If you look at this and you just go, what are the two most important colors in here? You go blue and orange, complementary. Analogous colors are colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, or what we call adjacent, right? They're side by side on the color wheel. So in this particular work, you look at it and you go, oh, it's red, violet, violet, blue, violet, some blue, right? See, so it happens in this family right here. Analogous colors are very soft when they're next to each other. There's very little intensity that happens because you're not grabbing anything from the other side of the wheel. They're just very closely related. So it's a very soft feeling when you have them. There's a little tiny bit of yellow in here. It's not enough to be part of the color scheme itself. We call that a discord. Monet used them when he did his water lilies, right? We've got blue greens, blues, little blue violet. A triad would be an equidistant triangle on the color wheel. So blue, yellow, and red, right? You can have a primary triad. You can have a secondary triad. Okay, so here you see blue, yellow, red. That is a primary triad. Now, just for fun, I wanted to show you, this is the original pictures, Broadway Boogie Woogie by Mondrian. But just for fun, I thought, what happened if we took it and it wasn't primaries anymore? It was more like analogous. And red, violet, violet, blue, violet, and I just took it into Photoshop and changed these, and you can see it's just a different painting. It's just completely different. It lacks the intensity that this work does. I'm not saying this is necessarily wrong, but it's just completely different. So we need to think about that when we're putting colors together. There's a triad, John Lennon. This too is a triad. If you look at it, what are the three most important colors you see? Green, orange, and violet. Right? That's a secondary triad. Okay, monochromatic. Monochromatic is one color and neutrals. So you can do blue. In this case, you can see this color field painting by Mark Rothko. He's taken blue, he's mixed some blacks and some whites. That's it. That's all you get in a monochromatic. Picasso went through his blue period and just used blue, blacks, and whites. It can also happen in other types. I was just showing you paintings and flat things, but we use color theory in all different types of works, whether they're sculptures or like an installation like this. Color is important in all types of work. So what I want you to do now is I have posted some pictures for you to go in, and you pick the appropriate color harmony for that picture. So you'll have to decide whether it's monochromatic, analogous, complementary, or triad. Okay? And so just look at it. Just look at the picture in the quiz. Decide what are the most important colors there, and just kind of squint your eyes and look at it and go, it's these two colors or these three or one or whatever. And then you can pick the right one. Okay, now you go do that. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.